I'm so pleased to have two of the students who were involved in this joining me, Aracelie Colo'n and Hank Drucker. Nice to chat with both of you. First, how are you? I have 4 kids, and so I feel like we've lived the highs and the lows and the chaos and some of the, things that I think are silver linings, getting to spend more time with people, and the things that you're sick of, like getting to spend more time with people. How are you guys each holding up? Aracelie, why don't we start with you?
Well, I'm holding up pretty well. My parents' jobs have been untouched, thank God. So, you know, I'm privileged enough to feel secure in my home and where I live. I miss going to school. Never thought I'd say that out loud, but I miss going to school. I miss seeing people, but it's senior year, trying to get work done, trying to get accepted into colleges. The minus the pandemic, it's typical senior things.
Typical senior things without actually being in school and all
Yeah,
the typical senior
exactly.
things. Okay. Hank, how about for you? You've written, I thought, really well about kind of your experiences,
Thank
and you
you.
sound mad and frustrated and annoyed.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely first want to echo what Araceli said. Like, I'm extremely fortunate that my parents are secure in their jobs in terms of them being untouched, and I have a lot of security in a lot of different directions that a lot of people don't have during this pandemic. So I hope that that wasn't kind of clouded by the tone of the op-ed. I think I'm doing pretty well. School has definitely been, at the very least, it's been more substantive this year compared to the last 4 or 5 months of freshman year. So that's definitely something that I've been happy about. But generally, I'm holding up pretty well.
I don't think having privilege and recognizing it clouds anybody's point of view, right? I think everybody gets to have the story that they have,
Hmm.
and I think recognizing that you're really lucky is an amazing thing. But you certainly, people used to. I covered a lot of disasters as a reporter, and people always wanted to compare. Which is Haiti earthquake. Worse than the tsunami that took place in Southeast Asia, which is, or was
Hmm.
it the Tokyo? And I would always say, like, wherever you are, it's hard, and I tend not to compare people. Something can be devastating for someone, even if a lot of things are going well. It all really just
Hmm.
depends. Araceli, talk to me about this last year in this COVID Diaries. It's so remarkable because I mean, to see you guys go through it, and it's just beautifully done, and it just to watch you struggle has been so was just hard to watch. Mental health and teenagers is something that I always think about, partly because 'cause I'm a mom and partly because teenagers tend to clam up when things don't go well. Some kids talk a lot, but a lot don't talk at all, and it worries me a lot. Talk to me about mental health, not just for yourself, but also what you see in your classmates and how you see coming through that or out of that or what the impact will be.
Well, it was definitely extremely difficult to make the film. I mean, just speaking for like my portion, of course, there was a lot that I could have included that I didn't. And I remember when filming, my struggle, my story, I definitely debated about whether or not I should put that in the film because, well, I don't want the world to see me at like my lowest moment in life. But I thought that it'd be really important to, in a way, showcase my experience because personal story is universal story. And, I might be going through something that maybe someone else went through or vice versa. And I just think that it's really important to shine light on mental health, especially since just about everyone is experiencing just a little bit of that, especially the people who have had pre-existing mental health conditions before the pandemic, especially. And especially communities of color, I definitely feel like there's this stigma of mental health and mental illness in a lot of communities of color, and I'd like to, break that stigma. I'd really think it'd be great if we're able to start an honest conversation about mental health and the real struggles that come with it. So it was really important to do that, especially. And I am, again, I'm like super excited that like a film that, I co directed lives on HBO, where it's like, oh my gosh, I watched Euphoria and Game of Thrones and Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, and it's like my film is like right next to there. It's like,
And your own film too,
I
right there with it.
know, and I think that's insane, and I'm like so grateful. I couldn't have done it without my mentors, Sade and Johnny. They're so great. They're like family at this point, honestly.
Amazing, amazing. And yeah, I think you're exactly right. I'm glad you left a lot of that in because as hard as it was to watch, I don't know how you move people and how you explain things without showing the tough parts. Otherwise, everyone can give you a very nice, rosy, well, we all have dinner together and that's been fun, and it's not that. It is sometimes, but it's really not all that. Hank, in your article in Hechinger Report, it was interesting. You really talked about what you wanted from the city's mayor, Mayor de Blasio in New York City, and
Hmm.
you just were like, "I be honest." And that's such an interesting it really struck a chord with me because sometimes I feel like I run
Hmm.
around all day just yelling at my TV set and, like, could people just be honest about where we are, especially when it comes to the school? Explain for
Right.
people who are not New Yorkers what was happening in New York City around schools and being told what was gonna happen in your education and when you'd be really just everything that you were told.
Right. So right now, the mayor is claiming that all schools are open for live instruction. That is not true, depending on how you interpret that. I know for certain that my school is not offering live classes. What we are offering is in building learning, which is the Zooms from the classes. And I speak from my school, but I know there are plenty of other schools that are like that. And that is something that is not getting covered by the mayor. And you can't kind of have an open dialogue about like what does a really substantial school reopening look like, and kind of how can we augment it from here to make it so that the kids, not just the kind of live classes, but so it actually feels like there's all this talk about the social experience of school and how you want to recreate that. Like, how do you do that? How do kids who need guidance counselors get access to that in a meaningful way? And I think that it is impossible to have that conversation if, straight from the source, we're not being honest about what the schools look like right now.
Yeah, I think as a parent trying to figure out what was happening with my kids, if you don't have honesty, how do you make decisions about what you're gonna be doing in the fall and around vaccinations if they're gonna happen when you have to make those decisions way in advance? For both of you, when schools were first canceled, for my kids, it was in early March, really, basically just about a year ago. What were your first thoughts? Did you think, "Oh gosh, everyone's saying it's gonna be 2 weeks." I just remember, 2 weeks, and I remember thinking, "Oh, that's insane. That's not gonna happen." Araceli, what did you first think?
Well, being a junior at the time and having to deal with like SAT and and ACT prep and college prep, I was actually like super happy at first because I was super stressed out. And I'm like, oh yes, we have this 2 week break. I'm gonna rejuvenate. I'm gonna feel so much better when I go back to school. It's gonna be amazing. This is the break that I needed. And then a 2 week break turned into, okay, April 20th. That's when we're gonna come back into school. And I was like, okay, obviously a little weird because, it's for a little longer than 2 weeks, but okay, that's fine. And then April 20th turned into, yeah, maybe in May question mark. And then that turned into, yeah, we're just not going back. And it just became what I thought would be just a nice, relaxing rejuvenation 2 week period turned into not going back to school at all. And I felt crushed because although school was something that brought, a lot of stress on my plate as well as just like my general anxiety and, things of that sort. That's a place where I saw my friends, some who I even consider family. That's a place where I get to travel. I have a schedule. I wake up. I go out. I'm at school by this time, on the one train by this time, going back home at this time. It's like you don't realize how much you need those things in those time periods and places to go to just function. I didn't realize how much I needed it until I didn't have it anymore. And that's something that I would say I definitely miss. And even now, what Hank was talking about, my college, or a college that I got accepted into, because I haven't committed anywhere yet, but a college that I got accepted into actually emailed us today and they're like, hey, so we just want to update you about our fall plans. You know, we're optimistic but cautious. We want to get people back into the building, obviously, so you guys can too. And I just think it's interesting. I have a lot of mixed feelings on it because part of me feels like, well, since we're talking about next year, or I guess in a few months, and by then, you know, Biden just said that people who are 16 and plus starting April 6th, I believe, are eligible to get vaccinated. So I'm already going to be stalking whatever websites I can April 5th. And I feel like, okay, because they're planning for a new semester, I can understand them being, you know, cautiously optimistic, but right now I don't think it's smart to let students back into schools. Not because, look, I want to go back into school more than anything, but just because teachers are vaccinated and they're not at risk doesn't mean that the same thing applies to the students. And, you know, I feel like it's kind of problematic and counterproductive if you open schools up and only some or a minority of the population is, you know, protected and not all.
And how about for you, Hank? Did you think when someone said, "Okay, 2 weeks," in fact, when we were in spring break, and I remember thinking to my about my kids, like, "All right, well, 2 weeks, let's just leave everything in your room. You don't need to grab anything. It's only 2 weeks." And of course,
Yeah, so I think kind of for a lot of kids, there was, in the weeks leading up to it, it was kind of like seemed like a little bit of like a fun thing that was going to happen. Like maybe we're going to get some time off of school. We're not going to have to go into school. Like, or the school's going to close. And I would say basically like the second I found out that they were actually going to close was like when all of that just went away. Like there were kind of no pretenses that this is a fun thing anymore. And I don't think that I thought it was going to be 2 weeks. I think originally I actually was pretty pessimistic about what it looked like. I definitely didn't expect, for whatever reasons have gotten us here, that it would be, up to 18 months before I'd see the inside of a classroom. And I definitely think that about what Aracelie was saying about kind of, what's the smart move, like talking about colleges, like, the vaccines, we're introducing these various measures, and you should be cautiously optimistic, but at the same time, is it a smart thing to bring students back? I think that there is definitely a school of thought out there that is like open the schools, at all costs, and that is not something that I subscribe to. I actually was, when it appeared that my school was going to open in September, I was frankly leaning towards not going back in out of concerns over COVID and what that would look like. But I would definitely say that I think it is possible. I think we have to address school closures as a simultaneous crisis that's occurring right now, and that there should be kind of ambitious, creative solutions that our government is not engaging in. Like I've seen no talk of mass outdoor learning, right? I think if you could have distanced, masked outdoor learning, that would reduce risk substantially. And we did have a program that the mayor introduced, but only a week before schools were supposed to open in September. It was very rushed. And so I think the correct characterization is that it hasn't been a methodical opening that would be safe. It has been kind of very rushed, corners cut, not a lot of thought put into what are we actually doing. Are we throwing doors open? Are we throwing kids back into classrooms? And I think we had an opportunity to kind of focus all of our attention on this very pertinent crisis that's occurring of school closures, and what are the ambitious solutions to it, where we can combat COVID, which is a very serious, I mean, the dominant backdrop to everything, and also combat all the issues that are occurring with the school closures. And I think we didn't address those two adequately in the context of each other.
what were the things that were stressing you out? Maybe I'll start with you, Hank, on this the most. Were you worried about your parents' health? I remember the first time I had to shoot and get on a plane, and I was just so anxious about it. I was double masked and had a face mask on top of that, like over my eyes, and I just remember feeling like I was playing Russian roulette, right? Because people really didn't know how transmittable this disease was on an airplane, and I had to travel for work, and I didn't want to bring it home, and I didn't want to give it to my kids who might be fine, but then give it to their grandparents, kind of thing. And I just remember feeling so anxious about it. Were you guys worried about your parents and contracting COVID? Were you worried about your parents and their jobs? What were your biggest concerns? Hank, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, so it was definitely in the beginning, there was not a lot that we knew. It was very mysterious and unknown. So even though, teenagers, kids under 18 do get sick at lower rates, less severe, but it's still a concern. But my predominant concern was definitely kind of what if I go out, give it to my parents? Like that would just be the worst thing in the world, and I have no idea, what are the long-term complications, especially back in the early months where it was totally unknown. So there was definitely a lot of the kind of underlying stress, like low level stress at a constant level, and it's just like having that as the backdrop to this months of like, definitely like we were wiping down the groceries, we were letting them sit in the foyer because there was just a lot of fear, and there was also a lot of fear surrounding like even if you don't get COVID, the hospitals have very limited capacity right now. Like what if you trip and fall down the stairs in your home? And so I think there was just a lot of fear and tension about kind of not just getting sick from COVID, which was the huge kind of mysterious, unknown, very scary thing in the background, but also, what happens if anyone in our family needs something and can't get access to it or doesn't get adequate access to it. So I think that was definitely the main concern and the kind of low level stress throughout the entire experience that built up and was kind of like the backdrop and what made the whole experience kind of this like traumatic experience for everyone.
That's such a great point. I'd forgotten being so panicked that if someone broke their leg, right? Like not even contracting COVID, but if someone fell off their bike and broke their leg, like just how complicated that could possibly be if you couldn't get them to a hospital, if you couldn't get in, things like that. You're absolutely right. How about for you, Aracelie? What were the things that were stressing you out the most? Were you worried about your parents' jobs, both keeping the job or contracting COVID on the job?
Well, I would definitely say, like, take what Hank said about being stressed and having this, like, low grade anxiety all the time, except multiply it by, like, 10. So that's definitely something that, you know, due to, like, my generalized anxiety and panic disorder and just set of anxieties, like, what I had before, it was just multiplied. I remember, like, there was a week straight when I would check my temperature, like, every single day. I remember one time my throat was feeling like this is right before school closed, but my throat was feeling scratchy, and I was like, "Oh my god, I'm sick. I'm gonna drink orange juice," and I don't drink orange juice, and it's like little things like that where I'm like, okay, maybe if I do this, like I just have more control. I definitely felt super. I don't even know the word to say besides anxious, just distraught and terrified. My dad, he's a postal worker, so I was also very concerned about him getting sick on the job because I don't want my dad to get sick. And yeah, he's not, at the age of 65 or older, but I still don't want my dad to get sick. And he actually just recently got his first vaccination, and so did my mom. So
Oh, great.
I'm extremely happy about that. And I honestly feel like my dad's vaccination was long overdue because he did go out like during the worst of it all. So the fact that he hasn't, or he just now got it, I feel a little insulted on his behalf
Mm.
because I just feel like, why would you let someone go out during these unknown times and then when finally something is able to be given or handed out to people, you don't give it to him or you wait? Like, I don't know. I just feel like we definitely have to reconsider who we consider essential, because during the times of pandemic, people who worked in pharmacies, people who worked at delis and bodegas and grocery stores, like they weren't looked twice at before the pandemic. And now, like, we were clapping for those people. We should still be clapping for everyone who works in like bodegas or small businesses, grocery stores, pharmacies, postal workers, bus drivers, and that's another part of the film for COVID Diaries that my good co-director Arlette Gualpa, she talked about how both her parents were essential workers and her dad's a bus driver, and she talked about how people who would enter the bus without masks were selfish, and I can't help but to agree with her. I think a lot of the unknown is what scared people the most, and I also remember just not looking at the news at some point. Like at some point, I just completely gave up on the news because I knew that it'd make me more anxious than better.
I remember hearing the ambulances. I don't live too far from various New York City hospitals, and at some point, the sound of ambulances all the time made me so anxious, just because you just would never know where it was going and you wouldn't know, you just knew that it was bad, right? And it was just never ending. It was just never ending. And you couldn't get the sound of ambulances all the time out of your head. It was so challenging. Do you think you guys both think we've heard enough from young people? It was interesting both in reading what Hank wrote and in the diaries. It was so interesting to I've heard from so many psychiatrists and psychologists and teachers and people, everyone's writing and giving us their 2 cents on young people and how they're dealing with COVID-19 and school. And yet, Hank, the first time I read your article, I was like, oh, this is a really interesting perspective that I actually haven't heard in the year that I've been reading about what are some opportunities and some solutions in all of this. Because very rarely do we turn to students themselves to talk about students. We often turn to the guidance counselor, the school psychologist. Do you think we're hearing enough from young people? What are we missing? Why don't you start me off, Hank?
Sure. I think that definitely we are not hearing from young people as much as we should be. And I think that's because there's a general sense that young people, don't really understand what we're going through and aren't really able to articulate what we're going through. And I think that kind of assuming that like our experience is, we can just push that to the side because it's not in the context of really having a broader understanding of the world because you're young is not the right attitude to have and the right perspective to have. I think each one of us over the past year has had our lived experience of online school and living in New York City while young, and people who live outside of New York City, all young people during the pandemic. Each one of us has had that lived experience that we have gained. So I think, you know, people aren't talking about it in terms of like the most articulate you can be is just to talk about what you've lived through because that is something that is real to you and is as objective as anything can be. And so I think definitely we need to be very conscious of not just listening to young perspectives but listening to a diverse variety of perspectives from young people because that is coming from the lived experience of what each and every one of us has gone through over the past year.
I was talking to a group of psychologists the other day, and it was one of the things that they were saying was that we really should think about young people as being strong and resilient. Their take on the pandemic was almost there's a lot of doom and gloom. It shouldn't be doom and gloom. We should be thinking about what an opportunity, as terrible as it is. They weren't being
Hmm.
crazy, but this idea of like we often look at young people as, oh, this is terrible, this is so sad, this is, and frame it as a terrible negative versus, you're resilient and you're smart and you are going to navigate your way through. Do you think they're getting it wrong, Araceli? How do you look at it? What do adults get wrong about how teenagers are dealing with COVID-19?
Well, I absolutely agree with Hank. I definitely feel like there is, in a way, an ageism that comes with, you know, life experience or people's perspective on life experience because I don't know, at some point society assumed that, okay, when you're an adolescent, this is your ideal life experience. When you're a teenager, this is your ideal life experience. When you're a college student or a young adult, this is your life experience. And that's not true. I definitely feel like age does not equate to experience at all. I believe that you could be extremely young and experience things that no one would expect a adolescent to experience. There is a lot of stigmatism that comes with being a teenager or with being just not an adult or not a young adult. There's a lot of, oh, well, because you're, let's say, 16, you can't do this, you can't do that. And I definitely see that more ever since I turned 18, like earlier this year. I feel like in some ways it's been different where it's like, oh, you're 18, you could do this, or oh, you're 18, you don't have to ask or go, or you could just this, that, and the other. I feel like that definitely is something that I've noticed a lot. And it's sad because, kids aren't dumb, kids aren't stupid. We are individuals who can think and can feel and who can come up with these ambitious ideas. And sure, we might not have all the life experience that you expect us to have, but we sure definitely might have life experience that you didn't necessarily expect us to have. And I think that it's just a general sense of ageism. You know, we need to hear from everyone. We need to hear from communities of color, like teenagers and just young adults of color. We need to hear from people from all backgrounds, and like regardless of, you know, age or gender, or sexuality or religion or race, like regardless of all that, we have to listen to adolescents and, you know, the teenagers and the young adults of our time, because we are the future.
And listen, everybody has the expertise of their own experience. Absolutely. You certainly have a PhD in your own experience, whatever your age is. Final question for you both.
Can I add one thing?
Oh, of course, Hank, go right ahead.
I just wanted to say, from the perspective of separating people into, let's let the adults handle it. Like, look at some of the adults that have been trying to guide us through the pandemic. Like some of the people in positions of authority who are adults. Like, I'm not gonna get too in detail about who I'm talking about, but
Embarrassing.
yeah, it's embarrassing, and it's like,
Would you like me to name them?
look at
I'm happy. You're young and you have a future ahead of you, but I'm more than happy to tick off the names of our leadership in New York.
Honestly, I'm 18. I could do this now, right? Because I'm an adult
No,
now, so I
you've
could
got
do
an
it.
employment history to build, but I am old. So yes, the mayor has been an embarrassment. The governor, what a mess in so many ways. A lot of the people who are dealing at the CDC and at the high-ranking people who are working with the president himself, disastrous. I think you're exactly right. The adults have not done such a bang-up job on this.
And our former president Trump, of course, we can't forget to name him.
seriously.
He's just a hot mess. Yes, on all fronts. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, for both of you, how has the feedback been on what you sort of put out into the world, right? It's always every time I write something, when I think it's great, when I think it's you always kind of put it out there, and then you have to wait for the feedback to come in. What's been the response to the film, to what you've written in the Hechinger report? What are folks saying to you? Why don't you start for me, Hank, and then I'll end with Aracelie.
There was a word limit on op-eds, so I had to kind of be very conscious of what I'm putting in there, and getting all my ideas down into the op-ed in a very succinct manner. And so I think, I was guided through the process by the editors of the Hechinger Report, Liz and Alan, and they were extremely helpful to me in kind of honing what I was trying to say. But I think, people have definitely, one of the criticisms that I was prepared for, and I saw some people saying, let me preface it by saying I am very aware of the dynamic that it is largely wealthy parents that are calling for schools to reopen. And I had hoped that I had kind of dipped into that idea in the op-ed.
Mhm.
But I think that if this could kind of be a platform to kind of correct what I might want to say about that, I think that people should recognize, and I'm actually extremely critical of the attitude where it's like, we have to do this for the people who need it, without actually listening to the people who you claim to be advocating for, and listening to the fact that it is largely parents of color, low income parents and families and students who have opted out at the highest rates, um, for reasons that are extremely poignant and important to talk about. And so I definitely want to clear up a misconception that my attitude towards it is not to say, we need to do this because I'm selfless, and I think that we should do it for the kids who really need it, and we have to do it for kids who are underprivileged, and we have to get them back into classrooms immediately. I think the attitude should be more focused on what can we do so that people who are more risk averse, for very, very accurate is an understatement, but for very serious reasons, risk averse to sending kids back into classrooms, what we can do to show that it is possible to do it in a safe manner. And I think, in fact, what has happened is that we haven't done it in a safe manner, and we've just confirmed a lot of the fears that people had about sending kids back to school. And so I think that definitely a lot of the reception I was very happy about, and I was very happy to hear what people had to say from every single direction. People are kind of very geared towards talking about, and I think that was one thing that I had wanted to kind of say, and I thought I dipped into it a little bit in the article, but obviously you can't say everything about this extremely complicated situation in 900, 1100 words. And so there's obviously a lot of room for conversation surrounding it. And I think people generally are actually very open to conversation and are not hostile. And some people are, but some people aren't. And some people are really willing to kind of talk about it on a very good faith basis. So I was actually very happy to see that.
And how about for you, Araceli? I mean, you said a moment ago that just, being on HBO, it's like
It's
amazing.
magical. It honestly is just magical.
But what's the feedback been like? You put yourself out there, and your co-directors to people who were in the film really, you bare your soul. It's sometimes hard to watch.
Well, I would definitely say that I've gotten a lot of positive feedback. People have reached out and like, "Are you okay?" And it's like, "Yes, I promise I'm fine. I'm doing better now, and please don't worry about me." But I would definitely say that it's been great feedback. I think that, I guess, speaking a little bit less about COVID and more about the film industry, there is a diverse set of directors for that film, and majority of them were people of color. And I just think that I hope that our cast of directors could one day reflect upon the film industry, because I feel like the film industry has just been a white man's world for a very long time, and I do not believe that all stories that are being told are produced by white men. I think it's produced by a set of diverse and unique and different individuals, and I just really hope that, I can continue with my career and I can continue doing these great things and having great opportunities to not only share my story and to share my voice, but to also just promote the fact that I am a young woman of color who's making her way into a male white dominated industry. And I want to change that. And I hope that I can also inspire other storytellers from all backgrounds to speak up and to share their story, because everyone has a story to tell and everyone's voice, it matters.
I loved hearing both of your stories. Really, your points of view are so well laid out, and it really made me realize, like, wow, I have not heard from young people. Why am I listening to all these school psychologists and guidance counselors and teachers and principals and people who run the school board, et cetera, et cetera? And it was such a breath of fresh air to really hear from students. So a big thank you, Araceli and Hank. Thank you for talking with me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.